明けましておめでとうございます。
I mean, you're off by like 4 months, but I guess whatever gets us closer to these shows, sure. But yeah, this week opened with the Deer Club, sans their titular fawn, heading out for their first shrine visit of the year. Koshtan was of course wondering where Nokotan was, but the crowd started to form, so they decided to go ahead of her, where they discovered that she had already beaten all of them to the shrine. Yeah, not too surprisingly at this point, she was considered to be the local deity of the area, with one of her biggest supporters being that lady from the zoo in the 5th episode, Mitsu. And I think there might be something wrong with that age listed. Yeah, she figured that Kiko Inoue was a vampire who sucked the life out of her fans to maintain her 17-ishness. Granted, I think they were also implying that Nokotan had been possessed by the deer deity, but as Koshtan pointed out, it really made no real difference. Still, she mostly went along with the festivities, including getting a seemingly lucky antler fortune. I mean, it was probably better than Kinu's, who was also there with the rest of the student council. Really cute outfits, by the way, even though Neko seems to insist on wearing oversized clothes that she was going to trip in. Anyway, Koshtan managed to meet up with Nokotan, who was serving up what looked like amazake, which is a sake that has been boiled for a long time to evaporate almost all of the alcohol and make it consumable for minors. However, I guess in these parts, they didn't boil booze, but rather deer. Hey, you can still sell this bathwater to certain people. Eventually, they moved on to the final ritual to bring in the New Year's, which was the burning of the deer crackers and antlers. Also, gotta give legit credit to Kiko for going all out playing this insane old hag and the nonsense she spouted. It takes a lot of credit to go from the real life Kirimi Tojo to whatever this is. I think the girl next to you could provide that if you pray for a second season like I am. Anyway, the segment ended with Nokotan glowing again and turning into a Buddhist statue. Yeah, maybe the show is actually committing all sorts of sacrilege already. Nokotan would later meet up with her friends, seemingly not possessed by the deer deity, but again, it's not as though that really mattered, as the only real difference was a different set of antlers. Overall though, this was a good first half, unlike last week, complete with brain rot that had somehow spread to everyone in town. It also expanded well on the original manga chapter it was based on, as it actually took place before the new school year, and therefore all of the secondary characters hadn't even debuted yet, except for Anko, though she didn't appear in the chapter either. She did, however, appear in the next story. The second half, or main show according to Nokotan, featured the Deer Club minus Meme playing the Deer Game of Life. She didn't participate as she was busy making mochi, and as we just said, this was based on a manga chapter that predated her debut, and by extension, Anko enrolling in their school, so she was still wearing her middle school uniform at the time. Man, Sakurai is getting desperate for new characters. Anyway, like the regular Game of Life, it was mostly a game of chance, where the winner was determined by who was the richest in the end. Though in this game's case, the currency was of course deer crackers. Also, the NPCs would be played by people they knew, like Ukai-sensei, which yeah, Kiko was kinda busy with this episode, wasn't she? However, Koshtan's first NPC encounter were the delinquents again from the 5th episode of the show. They acted as a penalty square, and since Koshtan didn't have any crackers at the start of the game, California in a nutshell. And for the last callback of this episode, Nokotan ended up right back where she started from in the telephone poles with no one to rescue her this time. Meanwhile, Anko got the, Rose of Versailles space, I think. The French Revolution would have been a lot shorter if she had been around. Anyway, after a few more Fist of the North Star references, all of the players converged on the life choice square, where they could choose different paths for the remainder of the game. Anko, Koshtan, and Nokotan chose to go to the mountain, city, and sea respectively. Nokotan's choice ended up landing her in Alaska, where I guess she had also gained enough levels to evolve. And all she had to do was wait until Legends of Arceus for an evolution. And just like the much anticipated evolution, it didn't amount to much due to the game's unfair power creep. Yeah, there's a good reason I don't play Pokemon as much these days. Meanwhile, Uncle became the queen of the animals, which hey, I'll take her over Mufasa at this point. And Koshtan used her Hatsune Miku powers to become an international idol and managed to take first place. However, Nokotan did manage to play a little catch-up when her journey led her to a bear that she befriended, and...
これでアラスカに、いや、アメリカに平和が訪れました。
Did they just do the Trump meme? Oh well, Nokotan 2024. However, and maybe because she was governing the US, she was still losing to Koshtan, who had amassed the most crackers as the game was winding down. And she would have won had it not been for the last square she stepped in, which included cameos from the student council, who weren't in the original manga chapter, and were just some no-name NPCs. Thus, it did make things a lot funnier when Kinu ended up freaking out over Koshtan being involved in a career-destroying scandal, and Neko was a tabloid reporter trying to expose her. But yeah, due to being exposed as a capybara, Koshtan lost all of her crackers, and Nokotan took first place. Still, in the end, they at least had fun, and imaginary or not, we got to see these characters in some insane scenarios that would normally be impossible for them, except for maybe Nokotan, as again, she'd make a better candidate than what we have now. With that though, they also checked in on the anime original background story of Meme making mochi, and almost choking on some. Fortunately though, the episode ended with Nokotan saving her by using Sap Sipper, I guess. Well, at least she's not totally power creeped in this game. Now, this was some of that insane and fun brain rot that we usually like from the show. I mean, aside from the usual bit of everyone sans Koshtan buying into the deer nonsense, just the general scenarios and how far they went with them were endlessly entertaining to watch, especially when they were given the freedom of imagination through that board game. Goes to show that for characters like this, all you really need to do is put them in some unique scenarios and the stories practically write themselves. I think another strength of this show is how pretty much anything can happen and it wouldn't feel out of place. They could have Nokotan become an actual god and it would just be another Tuesday for her. Though for the sake of good comedy, they of course had to flesh out these inane scenarios with some more little details like turning a game of life where anything could happen to characters becoming president, kings, or even freaking idols. As long as the stuff matched up with the general established personalities of these characters, then really anything could go. My personal favorite was of course the rise and downfall of the dear idol Koshtan, who went from the haughty gangsta top of the industry to just another has-been amongst many, which really made this one of the most real stories of this show so far. It also helped that for this and the New Year story, she managed to rope in the student council, who weren't in the original manga chapters, and managed to add to the hilarity with their antics. Hell, in general, all of the characters managed to have some hilarious moments, whether they were in the original manga or not, from Uncle fully embracing her debauchery, to Meme making mochi in the background. It's all hilarious stuff that even cleverly calls back to previous gags in the series. And overall, this was probably the most consistently funny episodes of the series so far. While I'm not sure if I could say they reached the godly peaks of previous episodes, nothing here was ever the least bit boring, and if anything, the brain rot I got from this show was at least more interesting than what we get from other political debates. Thanks for watching, and as always, maybe check out some of our other videos on this channel. We've got a lot of things cooking for the coming months, in particular once we get to the actual new year of 2025, which is looking quite promising to say the least. Look forward to it. Until then though, for now my friends, and this water smells kind of funny. Oh, I see. Let's see. 1, 2, 3 antlers. Well, at least it's my lucky number.